One of my favourite changes in the most recent patches has got to be the lowering of the tank spawn points. They've played around with it a bit since they first implemented it, but it just changes the game so dynamically, and newer players can learn the game a lot easier. It's just a lot more fun in general. So I thought, when could there be a better time to make this kind of video? Before the Valkyries update, which is the one where they added the helicopters, heavy tanks were quite risky to bring out, just because they had a lot of, they had a high spawn cost compared to most of the vehicles, especially kind of like medium tanks and tank destroyers, which could be super cheap at some points. The cost didn't always correlate with the value, depending on balance or how they compared to other tanks, especially medium tanks at their kind of level. And it was kind of a one-shot, if you brought out a big tank and then you died straight away, you might not get another spawn in that game. And this kind of rendered a lot of other vehicles in the game pretty useless, because there was just simply no reason to take them over the cheaper and often more effective medium tanks. There's some exceptions. And of course, to showcase this, I'll be using the infamous and ironically named Conqueror. I say ironic because I don't know, I did quite well in it in this video, in this footage, but god, like, before this patch, this thing was just pointless, because it was basically just a massive Centurion with no armor and only a slightly better gun and an incredibly long reload. So this thing was pretty much irrelevant before. But the first thing to do when you're adding a heavy tank to your lineup is make sure that you have nothing higher than it in terms of BR. This is really, really important, because heavy tanks usually rely on their armor, and as the level and the battle rating of vehicles increase, often the guns and ammo do too. And this can kind of render heavy armor, which is obviously the main part about heavy tanks, kind of useless, because higher rated tanks just shoot straight through, and all vehicles perform best at their own battle rating or lower, but it's really important when it comes to heavy tanks. Another important thing to remember about the vehicles is that often they can be renowned for their weaponry. For example, the Conqueror being at this rating because of its gun rather than its armor. And sometimes that's great, bigger guns often mean slower reload speed, so you got to make sure you plan ahead and don't rush in, before you can fire again. But this also makes targeting multiple enemies difficult, so it might be better to choose wisely before opening up. Meanwhile, a big round is likely to decimate. You don't want to miss or not hit the vital parts of a tank, because they could easily turn and counter on you. And I think this is something that isn't really considered when it comes to BR. I think it goes without saying that heavy tanks are big, bulky machines, and again, this can work both ways. When you have such a big profile, you're much easier to see and hit, so try not to sit on top of hills or anywhere in plain sight. Instead, like, pop out and shoot before returning back to cover to reload. And while your armor is more likely to save you, it's just bad to not get hit in the first place, which is kind of strange when you think about tanks. And you do get points for being hit. So if you're in something blatantly obviously better, like an IS-7, then getting shot isn't necessarily bad, because you'll get more points for that. But I don't know, I'd be kind of careful with it, because it's not, you can't really rely on it. And kind of one last point I wanted to make is, like, you're probably going to be quite slow in a heavy tank. A lot of them are, but it doesn't always apply. This is the point where I would look sideways at an IS-7 while the Russian anthem is blaring, because Jesus Christ, those things don't make any sense. I say that purely because logically you'd think a massive tank like that would be slower, but hey, it's more likely you'll probably miss capturing zones, and you'll risk getting outflanked by like other vehicles. Yes, you're in a massive, beefy, heavy tank, but that doesn't mean you have to charge in first. Often sitting back and letting everything play out before you can be beneficial, because it allows you to take out targets with your better gun. You can actually flank in slower tanks, believe it or not. And armor is also much harder to penetrate at range, so don't feel bad about camping. It is actually a valid strategy. Of course, it goes without saying that there's a time and place for a big metal pincushion. I'd also like to add on just a side note, after I've sort of edited this video up, I got quite a good reception on the last sort of how-to War Thunder video I did, which was also the first one I did, so I was quite surprised. A lot of people said it looked quite professional, so I'm pretty happy with that, because I did spend quite a lot of time on the visuals of it, and making the audio sound good and stuff. So all the feedback that I get in the comments is fantastic, and I replied to a lot of them saying I was going to do more stuff like this, but I had an issue with my microphone, and I had to have it sent back and then be sent back to me again. So I've got that now. I could do it more often. Most of my time playing this game is in either Air RB or Tank RB. And Air RB I find kind of boring. I haven't really played it very much in a long time. So I can do it, If any of this advice helped you, or you simply enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and a comment, as it gives me more motivation to do this kind of thing, and you'll likely see more of this in the future. Also, it'd be great to recommend my videos to anyone else who might benefit, because the more the merrier.